5 seasons, 8 kids, one staircase family photo every American still recognizes. But the real story only started once those 8 chairs began emptying out, one after another. It's 2026 now. Half of them are already gone. Hidden battles, overdoses no one saw coming, quiet disappearances, and one castmate who became far bigger than anyone could have guessed. This is what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. He almost didn't win the role that defined him. Dick Van Patten auditioned for Tom Bradford and lost. Producers cast someone else, shot the pilot, then scrapped it completely. Only then did they call him in. By then, he'd already lived one Hollywood life. He debuted on Broadway at 7. 2 decades later, he played Nels Hansen on Mama, until the Army drafted him. An unknown actor named James Dean took his place. 8 is Enough became his second act. For 5 seasons, he was the most trusted father on American television. Off camera, he ran an apartment building for young actors chasing their break. One tenant was a teenager named Ralph Macchio. When the show got canceled, nobody called him. He read it in the newspaper. Van Patten passed away in 2015 at 86. The man who taught a generation to believe in fathers who show up never stopped showing up himself, even when no one showed up for him. But the woman who was about to play his wife had already been fighting a diagnosis no one on set could see. March 27th, 1977. A woman dies in the arms of a young actor named John Travolta. It happens 12 days after her first episode airs to millions of homes. Her name is Diana Hyland. She's 41 years old. She just landed the role of Joan Bradford, wife and mother on a brand new ABC Family show. She'd already lived one full career by then. Broadway, opposite Paul Newman, a film with Marlon Brando. Nearly 2 decades in front of cameras before anyone met the Bradfords. She even crossed paths with her future TV husband before that. 15 years earlier, on a soap opera. She played his on-screen wife then too. What almost nobody knew, she'd been fighting breast cancer for 2 years already. A mastectomy, chemotherapy. She kept working through it anyway. She filmed 4 episodes. Travolta later said she didn't know for certain she was dying until 2 weeks before the end. They'd been planning to move in together once he finished filming Saturday Night Fever. She never got the chance to move in. She left behind a young son, Zachary. And months after her death, the Television Academy gave her an Emmy. It was for her final performance, playing Travolta's mother in a different show entirely. He accepted it for her, on a stage she never got to stand on. She didn't get a lifetime with Travolta. She got something rarer, certainty, right before the end. You've probably heard her sing, even if you don't know her name. That aching Broadway ballad about a faded cat remembering her glory days, that's her voice. Betty Buckley won a Tony for it in 1983. But 6 years earlier, before any of that, she stepped into a role nobody envied. Diana Hyland had just died. The show needed a new mother, fast, for 8 grieving kids who genuinely believed they were losing a parent. Buckley became Abby, schoolteacher, then stepmother. Then, as she'd later put it, a real stepmother in every sense that mattered. She stayed 4 seasons. Then she went on to Cats, to Sunset Boulevard, to a Tony nomination for Triumph of Love. Now 78, she's still performing. A residency at a New York club, a brand new single released this year. She once pulled a young Rufus Wainwright out of a hotel pool before he drowned. Almost nobody knows that. It's the kind of thing she'd never bring up herself. She didn't just replace someone the world had lost. She built something steady enough to still be standing 5 decades later. Luke Skywalker almost played the oldest Bradford son. Mark Hamill filmed the pilot. Then Star Wars called, and a car accident sealed the deal. Hamill was released from his contract. Grant Goodeve stepped in, and he stayed for 5 seasons. He even sang the show's theme song himself. Off camera, he and his wife spent a Christmas in Vermont with their on-screen little brother, an 8-year-old named Adam Rich, learning to ski for the first time. That trip meant so much to the couple, They later said it's why they decided to start their own family. Now, 73, Goodeve lives in the Pacific Northwest. Decades of hosting a regional travel show, plus voice work in video games most of his old TV fans have never touched. He still remembers that Vermont trip fondly, even now. He never became a movie star. But somewhere out there, 3 grown children exist, partly because of one ski trip with a boy the world hadn't yet learned to worry about. There was something happening in her dressing room that no camera ever caught. Lonnie O'Grady played the steady older sister, Mary Bradford, the one everyone could lean on. Off camera, she was the one who needed somewhere to run. Before the show, she'd already grown up inside the industry. Her mother discovered child stars for a living. Her brother had been an original Mouseketeer. Here's what almost nobody knew while the cameras rolled. She'd been having panic attacks since she was 18. She saw 32 doctors over the years before one finally named it, panic disorder, diagnosed at 21. Sometimes, mid-scene, the fear hit so hard, someone had to drive her home. By her 30s, it had grown into agoraphobia. She couldn't leave her own house anymore. 5 separate stays in rehab followed. In an interview once, she said something most people in her position wouldn't. She refused to blame the industry for any of it. In September 2001, a week before her 47th birthday, she was found dead in her home. The coroner found lethal levels of 2 prescription drugs in her system. Whether it was intentional, no one could say for certain. She spent 30 years fighting something invisible, and she never once let it become her excuse. A Broadway musical about sexual liberation. A cult horror film called Warlock Moon. 5 seasons as the free-spirited Bradford daughter, Joni. Lori Walters had already built a real career before anyone called Cut on 8 is Enough for the last time. Then, in the early 90s, she looked at herself and made a quiet decision. She wasn't going to become a leading lady. So she walked away, not into obscurity, but into the forests of Los Angeles, coordinating volunteers who planted trees across the city. Now, 79, she still lives in Ojai, California, where she directs local theater and calls herself, half-joking, the town's unofficial librarian. Her husband, John, passed away in 2017. She stayed in the community they'd built together anyway. She once studied conservation before acting pulled her away. Decades later, she got the chance to go back and finish what she'd started. $10,000 a week. That's what she was earning at the peak of 8 is Enough. Susan Richardson played Susan Bradford, the practical 4th daughter. And for a few years, she was one of the highest paid 20-somethings on American television. Then came the pregnancy storyline, written straight from her real life. Producers wanted the baby weight gone fast, or she'd lose the role. Nothing conventional worked, so she turned to cocaine instead. A secret nobody watching at home could have guessed. That was just the beginning. Decades later, doctors diagnosed diabetes. Then, a rare digestive disorder took every tooth in her mouth. Then came the strokes. Not one, several. Her weight dropped to 60 pounds, at its lowest point. She ended up living in a decaying trailer in rural Pennsylvania, unable to afford heat some winters. Friends and strangers still send her get-well cards, decades after the cameras stopped rolling. She's 74 now. Doctors told her years ago she shouldn't still be here. She's still here. Susan Bradford never got a storyline half as dramatic as the one her real life gave her, and she's still writing it, one more year at a time. She wasn't in the original pilot at all. When producers needed to recast Nancy Bradford, they picked Diane Kay for one specific reason. She resembled the mother the show had just lost. A quiet echo of Diana Hyland, built right into the casting call. On screen, Nancy bounced through a new job every week, a mortuary, a toilet factory, pumping gas. Off screen, Kay quietly built the opposite of a chaotic life. She's 72 now, living a private life in Pacific Palisades under her married name. No scandals, no tell-all memoir. Not much public record at all, actually. She simply chose to disappear from the spotlight completely after the cameras stopped. In a cast full of loud stories, she picked silence. That too is a kind of ending. She married a set designer from her own show during a hiatus at 19. She played a ballet dancer in Fame. She spent decades teaching junior jazz to teenagers in Orange County. Connie Needham's life looked steady, almost quiet, for a very long time. Then, in July 2009, a bloated stomach and shortness of breath, symptoms she blamed on a lung infection, turned out to be stage 3 ovarian cancer. A full hysterectomy followed. Chemotherapy took her hair. She wore a wig to class some days. She's 66 now, cancer-free, still teaching dance in Costa Mesa. She also sits on the board of the Women's Cancer Research Foundation these days, telling anyone who'll listen the same thing. Pay attention to your body, and don't assume anything is normal. She once played a dancer with a disease on television. Years later, life asked her to play that role for real. And this time, there was no script telling her how it would end. There's a scar in his story he doesn't often explain in detail. Willie Ames once stole a bottle of whiskey from the landlord he was renting from. The guilt afterward hit so hard, he hurt himself over it. On 8 is Enough, he played Tommy, the mischievous but harmless middle son. Off camera, he was also running a real rock band, playing 2 cities some weekends, then showing up Monday to film. Teen idol, musician, actor, all at once. Then came the fall. Alcoholism took over. By 2009, his car had been repossessed, and he was selling autographed memorabilia at a garage sale in Kansas just to get by. He later spent 5 years as a cruise director instead, visiting over 100 countries before acting called him back. He's 65 now, married a 3rd time, working steadily again in Hallmark films. When his TV brother Adam died in 2023, he wrote that Adam was the only real little brother he'd ever had. 3 months before that, Adam had tweeted that he'd been sober 7 years. October 2022, a tweet appears. 7 years sober, after arrests, after rehab stints, after overdoses that nearly killed him. He tells his followers, never give up. 3 months later, he's gone. Adam Rich was 8 years old when he became Nicholas Bradford. America's little brother, known for a haircut every kid in the country tried to copy. He tried marijuana at 14, dropped out of high school at 17. In 1989, a Valium overdose put him in a coma for 2 weeks. Rehab followed, more than once, at the Betty Ford Center itself. In 1991, he broke a pharmacy window trying to steal drugs. The man who bailed him out of jail that day was Dick Van Patten, his TV father, showing up for real, off camera, the way the character never had to. More arrests followed, more rehab. Then, 7 years of sobriety, hard-won, real, something he was proud enough to post about publicly. On January 7th, 2023, he was found at his Los Angeles home. Fentanyl. Accidental, the coroner ruled. He was 54. He spent 7 years telling people not to give up. Whatever happened in his final hours, that message was still true. Even the night it stopped being true for him. You know his face from a karate uniform, a wax-on, wax-off lesson, a yellow convertible in a garage. What almost nobody remembers. Before any of that, he spent 1 season as somebody's troubled nephew in a family sitcom about to end. Ralph Macchio played Jeremy Andretti for just 10 episodes, Abby's orphaned nephew, written in mostly to give the aging show one more storyline. He was even living in an apartment building owned by his TV grandfather, Dick Van Patten, at the time. Small world, smaller role. 4 years later, the Karate Kid made him a household name. He's 64 now, still playing the same character decades on in Cobra Kai, with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to show for it. The biggest star this family ever produced almost got lost in the credits. That staircase photo still hangs in reruns, in GIFs, in nostalgia compilations. 8 kids frozen mid-smile, forever the same age. It means something different now, knowing what came after. Fame never protected any of them from what was coming. Money didn't either. What actually saved the ones still standing was something much smaller: a phone call, a bailed out arrest, a ski trip nobody thought twice about at the time. Being somebody's little brother on television turned out to matter more than being famous ever did. So tell us, which Bradford kid stuck with you the longest, and why?